Welcome to the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lampson. If this is your first time listening or your 50th time listening, this is what to expect on this episode. We dive into the concepts of developing your leadership toolbox. Why do you need this? You need this in any situation to help manage, lead, and control, and ultimately win. How do you do that? You can't use the same form of leadership in everything you do. So every episode we dive into my leadership philosophy. We dive into the story and the background of the person we're talking to. And we also dive into some leadership traits I have accrued throughout the years. And then we also follow it up with a book review at the end. So you're getting a wide range of leadership topics and traits that you can add to your kit. So without further ado, let's go into the recap of this episode. And afterwards, if you love it, like it, share it, follow it, give us some feedback, because we're only just getting started. All right, on this week's episode, I'm joined with Jason Schwarzer. He's a Chief Field Artillery Battalion. He's been in the Army for 15 years. And some of the things we just connected on right away through social media was endurance training, rucking, and just leading by example. But here's some of the big picture stuff we talked about in today's episode. We talked about daring to be different, a professional introvert, enforcing the standards in everything we do, courage, and then 5 wins to start the day. Again, very basic stuff we talk about, but it's how you execute on it every single day to build those habits. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any questions or feedback, I love the support, so provide it to me if you can. And then save, share, like, and follow as you listen to the episode and continue to grow in your leadership journey. All right, let's get this show on the road. All right, what's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. Just like you heard in the intro, I'm here with my man, Jason. And I'm pretty excited. For one, it's Valentine's Day for those that are looking at the date of the episode. So for people to take their time on a day off or a holiday to join me on an episode, I really appreciate, because sometimes that's all the time we have. You know, the work week's always tough. So I'll reach out to people and be like, hey, how's like Valentine's Day or a holiday for an hour in the morning? And they're like, sure. I'm like, cool. So Jason, I appreciate you taking the time. And just like we talked about before, I'm excited because just like with 99% of my podcast, it's people I've met through social media. And I am a huge fan of social media. I love what it brings to the younger generation and connecting with us older generation, right? Like those that have been in for 10 years or more, where we didn't have that accessibility to seeing what people are going through, build relationships with the people outside of our organization. And so it just helps, I think, strengthen this military bond that we have through social media, bringing the good out of it. And so we'll talk about that probably a little bit later. Usually always comes up. But without wasting too much time, let's jump into these 3 H's. So hometown, your heroes, and a hardship. And the reason I ask this, and for those that have listened before, is because one, it helps me get to know you because this is our first time chatting. Yeah. But it also helps those listening understand where you're coming from when we talk about leadership. It gets the flow going, and it really just helps the transition into when we dive into leadership, and it keeps the episode going. And so I really love it, and it's a good time. So all to you, sir.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. Hometown, I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina, military brat. My dad was in the Army, so, we traveled all over the place, but Fayetteville is definitely home. North Carolina will always have a special place in my heart, for sure. Heroes, I know I listed 2, but I really have one hero. Well, it's my father. It's just the undeniable standard he has set as a leader, as a man. It's really hard to put somebody kind of next to that. But I do have honorable mentions, of course. So I have, quite a couple mentors in the Army. I would say in this phase of my career, this phase of my life as a leader, by one of my previous first sergeants, name drop First Sergeant Wildridge. It's just like he exemplifies what a leader is, and it's consistent. Like even when the trend of a unit is not where it's supposed to be, he still enforces what the standard is. Even though others dislike that action, still got to stand on business. Like you have to do the right thing, period. That's it. You know what I'm saying? It's all about NCO business. So that's something I always aspire to, for sure. And then hardship in the leadership standpoint, I would say the moment I came into an impasse as a leader. You know what I'm saying? Like I always consider myself a leader, and I'll talk more about that. I break my career down in phases of my leadership, but at this particular moment, i.e., when I was a recruiter, I had to understand it's not about me, and I think that was a moment of enlightenment that like really strengthened the foundation of why I want to be a leader. So I would say that's my enlightened ship instead of hardship. So definitely.
Yeah, once you really find that out, that your career isn't about you,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard, especially I think we probably have the same perspective going through our career. When we start off, it is about you when you start off in your career, but once you hit that mark where like something goes off in your mind, and you're like, man, it's not about me anymore to get where I need to go. Like I'm gonna get there eventually, or it's gonna happen, but I need to, when I get there, feel positive of how I got here, have a team with me, be comfortable that I did the right thing. And that's when I feel like I had the same switch, when I was focusing on myself, it helped me focus on others more.
Yes.
And so that's why when we'll hit it later, one of my leadership philosophies is to be selfless. You have to be selfish. Because for me to really make it about them, I need to know I'm sort of taken care of, right? Like my life is taken care of, my habits are taken care of. So I can sort of put that on the side and really shift gears to them.
Yes.
And I love that you said that's a big transition for leaders, because sometimes it's hard. As a leader, we're trying to lead our career, right? Like have the best career, have the best statements, whatever. But you really don't get there unless those below you are doing more. They're winning more. They're excelling more. They're building the culture you're trying to leave behind. And so, man, that's good. Nice. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about how that broke down. She said it was going to break down into your career, those phases. So explain that a little bit.
I would say the first phase, I consider myself a leader. E4 specialist, promotable. I just went to the promotion board. I'm aspiring to be a sergeant. Not really understanding the true, I guess, weight behind it, but figuring it out along the way. One of the obstacles I had at that moment, or I can say obstacles, but friction points I had at that moment, the soldiers I served with, I went to like training with, like basic training, AIT. So it was kind of hard to separate that, friends to leaders. So that was growing pains for sure. And I like to break it down into like campaigns. Like, so for specialists, the biggest thing for that campaign was my confidence and daring to be different and not feeling guilty for the path of someone different or someone aligned with me. You know what I'm saying? So that helped me build that foundation. Once I became a sergeant in about 2013, I had to understand my awareness, identifying my limitations as a leader and, doing the right thing. Cause like in the Army, it could be a toxic culture, depending on what type of organization you're in. It's just like, once you have stripes, it's just like, oh, I have unlimited power. And it's not like that. So understanding the true responsibility of power and your impact versus just going crazy. So that was a learning lesson for me. And then getting promoted to a staff sergeant while in recruiting, understanding the importance of accountability, accountability of myself, holding others accountable, knowing that it's not only me producing results, and then you got to hold other people accountable to their results also, because it's an organization, it's a team goal. So for a lot of people, it's like I'm a extrovert, of course, but sometimes like at that point, I was really a professional introvert. Like, hey, you know what? If I just keep my nose clean, do what's right, everything will happen how it happens. But sometimes it takes that leader to step up and say, hey, no, you have to do your part. Like, even though I'm not going to say nothing, or I'm probably going to cover down, I can't do that anymore. So holding people accountable was a big thing, and the importance of knowing and enforcing that standard. So, getting promoted to Sergeant First Class, the biggest lesson I learned was servant leadership. So it's, again, not about me. So ensuring that I'm listening, being aware of my surroundings, my soldiers' well-being, filling that gap from where they are to their potential, showing the importance of development, at the molecular level, not just, you come to work and you do what you need to do and go home. Like, for those who've been in the service for a while, I've been doing over 15 years. This is a lifestyle. This is truly a lifestyle. So like what I do at home, what I do to prep to, enforce my leadership style, leadership foundation, that is also at home through the books I read, the conversations I have, the things I do. But yeah, try to encourage that to them. And yeah, like now I'm looking to, hopefully get promoted this year. It's a different avenue. In my campaign going to that one would be courage, having the courage to enforce the standard with everything I do down to the lowest level. And I know, again, been in for a while, at the top, one thing will be said, and once it reaches to the lowest soldier, it's something completely different. Like, how do we mitigate that? How do we get around that? How can we make sure our communication is effective and it reaches the lowest levels? And I kind of look at it as like an oil spill. When it rains, you got water, and then you got the oil spill in the middle. It's the thickest, and then it starts phasing out to colors and start being diluted. No, we got to have that consistency all throughout. So now it's time to figure out a different approach to address senior leaders like myself. How can we be effective to the lowest level and ensure we can like maintain that? So having the courage to even bring that up, I think that's going to be my biggest obstacle. So courage is for Master Sergeant is going to be that campaign. So
I like how one subtle line you threw in there, which I use a lot, is you said enforcing the standards in everything we do, not just at work or in PT or where we are comfortable at. There's a saying I love is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Yep.
It's a very humbling statement when you say it out loud or say it to yourself, because you can be very good at PT or very good at your job, but you may not be very good at a husband or a spouse or partner or someone somewhere else where you're not really good at. And so whenever I feel comfortable in an area of my life, like let's say I'm just crushing PT, right? I always sit back and go, is that what I'm doing in everything? Am I being good at everything? Am I being good at taking care of my kids or leading my airmen or my flying the B-1? If I hesitate, I'm like, oh, I didn't do that good. I'll try to shift a little bit. Well, let me go pick that area up and really focus in on that, okay, cool. Now like that's going good. A lot of people, when they hear that, they sort of chuckle because they think it's like impossible, or it's just like it doesn't mean a lot. But when you are trying to be the best version of yourself, really humble yourself, you have to say, am I doing that in every aspect of my life? And for some people, it can be financially, spiritually, health, wellness, work. It is a lot. It's a lot, but that's why it's challenging, and that's what we need, And so when I heard you like slide that in there, like in everything we do, it's like, man, that's tough, because I think that's a huge leadership step throughout the military. E1 to like E4, our senior airman rank, you're just focused on a job. Your job is to be the best at your MOS or AFSC, run the tasks, do your thing, And so that is your everything. But as you get older, you get relationships outside of work. You have friends. You're doing TDYs. You may have other passions that you're trying to develop for when you get ready to retire. And you're just stacking all these, coins on this plate. And then you got to figure out which one's important. And then, like you said, when you get up at NCO, man, that everything shifts, to the people below you now. Like, okay, now I need to make sure they're doing what they got to do. Leadership does not get easier as we get older. That's for sure.
It's not.
I don't think there's any point in anybody's career where they hit like this leadership plateau and they're like, cool, I got it all, like I'm comfortable. I've learned all the leadership traits. I can just coast. It's like,
No, that's funny. And that's crazy that you say that. Like, I'm similar in that aspect because like I always like look for gaps for growth. Like every day, like even though it's like very monotonous being on like staff, like supporting like battalion commander colonel, and it's like the actions are the same every day. So it's kind of hard, or I can say hard, but you got to put your self-development to the side.
Yeah.
Most times. So I like to identify, I definitely just started my day like, okay, I have a time allotted for self-development. You know what I'm saying? How did I feel about my progress doing that activity or that subject? And I always like compare it to like I'm at my best, not when I'm doing everything right, but like when I'm having a point of friction. That's when I resort to my, program training. Is my training efficient? I'm saying now, okay, now I have an area approach to be better. So I try to apply that to like everything. So every day I'm learning, every day I'm, getting some type of takeaway to be better for the next day. And it's not only the professional, it's personal. Am I a good listener? Am I talking effectively? You know what I'm saying? Am I just blabbling or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Am I wasting people's time? I have to do better. So it's always a lesson at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing to develop as a habit, right? Like I'm a big fan of habits and routine, and it sounds like you got it down too, and you're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a power list every morning that sort of cages me in my day, tell me focused on what's important to build my future goal. And the one thing I'm trying to add is that like recap, of each day.
Yeah.
Even if it's as simple as just journaling, and I know journaling is very important, and I gotta step that up a little bit too. But just coming back at the end of the day and just writing down like, what can I do better? What did I do good today? What do I need to keep doing tomorrow? That recap of the day. It could take like 1 minute, just jotting it down, or a couple minutes. But those are the areas where they definitely stack up in the long run. And it's hard to teach that to those in the military because it's just not taught.
Yes.
A daily routine is not taught. Habits, like I time audit a lot. So there's times where I'll take like 3 days and I'll try to block it up into 15 minutes and write out what I do every 15 minutes. So at the end of those 3 days, I can buy like 5 or 10 minutes of these things. And it's gone to a point where it's pretty like nitpicky, where it's like, hey, where am I going to place my uniform at night to get it on the fastest side of the shower? So I'm saving a couple seconds there. Or like when my shower is warming, I'm going to take all my stuff out of my hygiene bag and place it next to my sink. So I'm not doing that after. And for some people, that's like pretty much OCD, but I'm buying seconds.
Yeah.
And I'm procuring them throughout the day so that I can take that time, and it adds up to maybe like an hour throughout. And that's like the detail of really winning, And for some people, it may seem like a lot, but it can start small. Just like maybe it's not fine tuning things. Maybe it's just like I'll brush my teeth after I get a shower, or you try to, and that's why habit stacking is so important for people to understand when it comes throughout the day. It's the morning, and you've seen it. The morning is the best time to win.
Oh yeah.
I tell so many people it's my zero time. My kids are asleep. My family's asleep. Nobody at work's going to bother me. I have 3 hours in the morning to win. I can do a lot with 3 hours, man. I read, I write, I'll check emails. When I go into work, they're already checked. I'll exercise.
Yeah.
I'll pack the kids' lunches, and like zero time win. That way, if I go to work and the day's crappy, at least I want something.
You want something. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely the same. Like even when waking up, like the first 5 things are, I would say, like easy wins, but it's helped me build momentum into like the more harder goals. So I'm definitely a big fan of routine, and I'm the same way. Like I see areas where I can like cut off time. Like if you do your meal prep, the night before, and have your lunchbox already gone or next to the fridge or whatever, ready to go, that saves me a good 10 minutes, instead of just making a sandwich or something like that, or like having my like protein and like pre-workout or electrolytes already set. I just get up, stretch, do my 5 goals, come in, grab my stuff, hit the treadmill or hit the trail. So it cuts time, and it's a motivation just to, keep going. So I'm definitely like that.
So how did you learn about that stuff? What was it like younger when you were learning about it? Because, everybody learns about leadership different. I feel like we learn it a little bit too late in our careers. It'd be nice to learn it when we were like E1s and stuff, but it's just not there.
Yeah.
So now that you've developed these skills, how do you teach it to those that are younger to get them ahead of where you are?
Okay. So I would say I learned it not really identifying it is leadership, like from my father, because coming in, growing up in a family where like he establishes a standard within our family, within our siblings, the yes sir, no sir, being on time, being punctual, being professional. I really didn't know what it was until like it hit me when I'm actually in. I said, oh, he was just doing what you're supposed to do as an NCO. So, it's just transition into like me being a leader, and how can I teach it to my soldiers and develop them. It's just showing the importance behind it, because it's like, if and you interact with soldiers, so it's the why. That's all it comes down to. So if you really highlight the why and how is it important, how it can make you better, it'll be easier for them to digest and execute. So I found that the most effective, for sure.
Nice. That's good. Yeah. The more I have started to dive into leadership, the more I see what my dad was. And he wasn't really teaching me, but showing me when I was younger, you know. And as a kid, I just didn't see it, you know. I just wasn't
Yeah.
focused on it, you know. When I was a teenager, going to school and sports, and wondering why my dad was getting up the same time every day, you know, and he had his routine. And I see it now in my life as I teach my son. And it's always great when I hear it on other podcasts from other guys that have that fatherly role model, and they talk about it as well. Because I'm always just like, yeah, you know, like, I wish back then I could have said like, hey, thanks, Dad, for. I can still say it now, and I do, but I just don't think it means as much now, you know. Because back then I don't know if the fathers pushed it as much as, you know, we may do now because of the way social media is and podcasting and all that and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back then he was just doing it, you know, like he was just going to work, but it was intentionally showing us like the yes sirs and no sirs. Like that was the same way I was raised. You know, when I worked for him at Les Schwab when I was in high school, you know, he would introduce me to the guys he knew by their last names, and he'd be like, hey, the only way you can call them by their first name is if they tell you, like, it's going to be Mr. So-and-so, unless like for instance, my coaches in high school, I always called them coach by their last name, like Coach Solis or Coach Haro. Even though I hung out with them all the time and I was their friends, their kids were in my class. So I'd go to their house, stay the night at my buddy's house and be like, hey, Coach Solis, instead of like, hey, Javier, which was his dad's name. I never called him by his first name.
Yeah.
And only until they were like, you call me Javi, you know, like you're out of high school now. You're an adult. You don't have to call me coach, but I still do. So those little traits are always, it's cool to look at now and be like, oh, you know, it's cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's definitely beautiful.
Well, let's dive, even though we've already hit leadership, let's jump into my leadership philosophy. So on the Air Force side, on the officer side, we go through some leadership courses. One is SOS for captains. Then another one is ACSC for majors. I think it's ASCS on Air Staff College School or something like that. It's an online master's program, and one of the first classes is a leadership class. And I was taking it right in the midst of this leadership transformation I was in. So I was really excited. I was like, oh, this is perfect. You know, like working for First Form, they established great leadership traits, and I was applying some of those in my life. And this class is like, hey, you're about to take command. You're going to brief the previous commander and your new command on what your leadership philosophy is. And it tells you like how to build leadership philosophy, short statements that mean a lot to you, how you run your life. And I was like, oh, yes, this is cool. So I sat there for a little bit and I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I came up with 4, and they're sort of in a pyramid flow of, you know, you start from the top and work your way down, but it's lead by example in all you do. To be selfless, you have to be selfish, build relationships based off trust and care, and then challenge the road in front of you, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And granted, a lot of those are from Andy Frisella and First Form because I just love their leadership style and what they teach. And now I'm trying to bring it to the military and show them as well. And so out of those 4, which one do you like? And then how would you, you know, teach younger soldiers if they're listening how to get better at it? Which one do you struggle with, and how would you get better at it? It's like a 2-ended question.
Leading by example in everything we do. It's very important because like soldiers are very observant.
Yeah.
Observant. It's like you do the wrong thing and you make the wrong thing the standard, they're just going to assume that's the standard. You know, so you have to lead by example in everything you do. Even again, like on the personal side, like being punctual, like being just your presentation, like how you even like wear your uniform. It's very important. So I think establishing that early will make it easier down the road for sure. Let's see. So being selfless, not selfish.
Yeah, to be selfless, you have to be selfish.
Yeah. So again, to be selfless and not selfish, I think the higher you get into the Army or through leadership, you have to be selfless. It's like, again, it's not about you. And you'll see as you transition, like everything becomes more about the soldiers, more about the organization, more about their effectiveness, and of course your effectiveness to lead them to accomplish the commander's intent or the intent at the end of the day. It's not about you. That's basically the grasp for that. And building relationships with trust and care, incorporating that type of approach when you do that is huge. Because like with my soldiers, like the first, I think, initial counseling when I first meet them, it's I'm gonna treat you like a human first, and you know the arm it's just part of the Army. But at the end of the day, you're human. I'm human. I understand mistakes. I understand, you know, disconnect, but I want you, we'll talk our level on a personal level, and then, it'll mesh into the professional approach. So that is huge. And then what was the last one? I'm sorry.
Getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Yes.
And this can tie into, this journey, because one of your notes was you decided to start running to develop what to do, like to challenge yourself more. So can tie into that as well.
Yeah. Getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I try to, I know the soldiers think I'm corny, but I try to bring a quote every day, I'm like, hey, it seems like, got it all together. Like I know everything. I tell them like a lot of the stuff, like I'm learning just like you, what I'm saying? And I don't have time to complain. I don't have time to like, oh no, do the kickback. I have to understand, okay, how can I be most effective to meet this intent? So even though I'm not very comfortable with it, I need to know how to accomplish it. So if I need to ask questions, ask questions. If I need to, relearn something. And it's not making you less of a leader just because you have to revisit your notes. That doesn't mean that at all. So long as you keep going forward, as long as you keep pushing through, comfortable, uncomfortable, whatever it takes, you have to follow through. And that's very important. And transitioning into running, like I played football in high school and college. So like short distances, not nothing crazy, but a big motivator for me, Nick Bear, he was at Fort Cavasso or Fort Hood.
Yeah.
And he's a bigger guy. I'm like, man, how can he move that far? And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. So of course, first long run was diabolical, you know what I'm saying? But I was like, okay, I need to learn like what it takes to go that far. And the knowledge, like the nutritional approach, the running knowledge I didn't have. So I was like, okay, I have to go out and understand like how can I fuel my body and, get my body to that point. So, being uncomfortable to like be in situations where I just have to learn. So like that inspired the hiring like multiple running coaches, really more for knowledge, not even for execution. And just listening. I'm like, man, I've learned so much. I have multiple running coaches and I've learned so much. And now I'm a bit more comfortable, but there's some areas I do want to strengthen. So now it's just, I have to, take the time to like, hey, you got to learn more. You can never stop learning. You got to learn more. You got to push yourself. The motivation's there, so the eagerness is there. I just need the additional knowledge. So sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow for everybody. Like, oh, I need more. I need to do homework. Ugh. But yeah, you just got to dive in. That's how you get your edge. That's how you become a better leader, a better person. You know what I'm saying? So just, swallowing that pill to, see that you need more. So
yeah, a couple of things you mentioned that I really like. You talked about it is hard for leaders to not necessarily fail, but to go back in their notes and restudy things and learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like a step I'll usually tell some people when they ask me like, how do I become a better leader? I'm like, try something new, do something you don't know what to do, which is hard, but because then they have to learn something again. And, there's a lot of good sayings, right? Don't be the smartest person in the room. If you are, find a new room. Like that right there is gold.
Yes.
There are so many I don't want to say they're leaders, but high rank in the military where they've been in the same room for so long. That's sort of how they got there. And it's like, man, you got to like try those different things. And, I played football in college as well when I was doing ROTC before I commissioned. And my transition to running started doing 75 hard. I started doing that. And I started rucking on my 45 minutes. And then I started jogging on 45 minutes. And I started running. And then I was like, man, how do I do a little more, get uncomfortable? And then listening to Andy's podcast, he had Goggins on there, and some hitters, some big hitters. And I was like, oh God. Then I read Goggins' book, and it was the worst book to read ever. So a lot of people, I was like, don't read his book. It's going to make you feel horrible. But it's needed, I needed to read it. I needed to know, what it was like to push your body beyond your limits and that it's still going to go. Like people don't realize that, like a lot of people are always going to be nervous to start doing a half mile or a 5K. Or do this because they think they're going to get hurt or they can't do it. I'm like, yo, there's like 100-year-olds running marathons every day. You're going to be fine. Your body's not just going to like crumble. It's going to hurt, but it's going to grow. It's going to get better. Um, and so that's what almost made it comfortable for me to challenge myself, is following people like Nick Bear
Mm.
and Cameron Haynes, and all
Mm.
these people
Yeah,
that are pushing the limits on their body and still surviving or living. I'm like, oh, if they
yeah,
can do it, I can
yeah.
do it, which is a horrible expression to live my life by, because I keep doing crazy things.
No, that's I agree with you, but like, yeah, you can definitely see like the body is very durable. Like, I
It's
think it's just
super durable. Yeah.
it's really just expanding your mind and like getting that, I guess that experience with your mind to reach up to your body or catch up to your body. So
Yeah.
yeah, your body is capable of some crazy things. You just need to go out there and find out. So,
Yeah, and like Goggins talks about that governor in his mind, that was his
mhm.
plateau. Where I think it's like the mind keeps us at like 60% of our capacity,
Yeah,
and once you get through that mental block of like my body's still moving, you can go a lot further. So there's always that wall in races, right? Like in a marathon, it's mile 20. Every time I do a marathon, no matter how good I feel or how crappy I feel, right on 20, it just sucks. And
yeah,
I've run a few now to where I know it's going to happen. So I go, okay, mind, you're going to kick in here soon and tell me I'm going to die or my feet are going to fall off. But let's just get through this mile, and you'll focus on something else.
mm,
And the mind's funny like that. The mind really doesn't change its tactics. It's just it just it's more consistent. Like
yeah,
sometimes, like when you start running, you'll notice you're like, oh, here comes that like right knee pain. Oh, but it only lasts usually a couple minutes. Okay, cool, it's gone. There's that first check mark on my run. Okay, next, maybe it's my groin's gonna start tightening up. That's just my mind letting me know it's time to stop. Nope, cool, that's gone. It's weird how the mind does that. It just does this pattern of ways to get you to stop. And
yeah,
when you keep going, it sort of like gives up. It's just like, and I think that's that running high. When
yeah,
your mind gives up on how far you're gonna push stuff, and your body's just like, let's go. Like
yeah,
some of those runs where you hit that is just like, man, this is nice.
yeah. I'm glad you said that because like I've been trying to I've been trying to get into Leadville like every year since
Okay, yeah,
like finding out who Nick Bear was on the physical side, and never got into the lottery, but I was able to get into like the heavy half, Leadville heavy half. So
okay,
about 15.5 miles, and coming from where I'm at, Belton, like 800, 900 feet elevation, going up to 15,000. And I'm like, I had to get I got a coach at that time just to have like a more like educational approach to it, because that's a huge jump. I
yeah,
definitely know. But running it, oh my goodness, the first, I don't know, point three of a mile, I was like, yo, and it's like a slight incline. We haven't even started climbing yet. And I'm like, my mind is like, yeah, we're not going to make it. But like, I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm like, man, but I'm still moving forward.
yeah.
And then like I
Yeah,
climb.
it's not like you stop when your mind says it. You're still going. Like,
Yeah, still going. I'm like, just lean forward, just go forward. And then when we hit climbing, like I know, like at a certain point, like my legs started to hurt. I'm like, okay, now I'm really starting to warm up, but I got to go through this transition because I ran 100 times. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
it's no different than climbing this mountain. And I'm like, man, yeah, I don't know. Probably had to stop, but I'm still moving forward. I'm still leaning forward. And then when in Leadville, it's like you climbing the pass, but it's like a fall summit or whatever. Then you get when it's another one. I'm like, man, I don't know if I can get it, but I'm still moving forward. And I end up climbing the last one, and then everybody's at the top. The people that's like supporting the race, like, yeah, you did it. Now turn around and go back down. Then and then going downhill. Obviously, it's all down here, so you just moving. I'm like, man, I'm really moving. I thought I'll be like dead tired or like not done. Like, it was crazy, and I'm like running, like literally running for my life because I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, there's a cutoff. There's a cutoff. Nobody told me there was a cutoff. I don't know why it even came up, but I'm like, you know what? Let's pick it up. So like end up cutting my like return time by like almost hour and a half. And I get to the line, I get to the finish line and giving everything. You know what I'm saying? And then the first thing I did, I almost broke down in tears. I was like, man, I finally finished Leadville. I can actually say that. And it was truly a humbling experience. Not like a bad experience, but it's just like truly humbling. I learned so much about myself on that mountain. So best experience ever.
yeah. One of my bucket lists is a 100 miler here soon. I've done a 100-mile bike ride. I've done some marathons. I've done an ultra. I've done the baton. So I've rucked a marathon. I've done a half Ironman. A full is definitely on the radar, but a full is a different beast, man. Like
Yeah.
something about 100 miles and a marathon. Oh God, it's
Yeah.
insane. That's why I think next will be a 100-mile run. I almost think that's easier than a full Ironman because just the transition and doing those different things, it's different on the body than get, and 100 miles is still tough. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
It's still hard,
yeah.
but yeah. So I got to pick and choose these battles. And usually every year, my wife and I'll sit down and we're like, okay, what's going on this year? Like we tried to plan something this year and it didn't work, but that's what's great about endurance and time. Like with
Mhm.
now there are 100-mile races everywhere.
Everywhere.
Man, they're crazy. And so I'm sort of like, hey, I don't need to rush this because if I need a time, I know I'll be able to find one.
Mhm.
But it'd be cool to do those big bucket list ones. And now that I've met so many people in the community like that, it's fun to be like, oh, I got this coming up, and I'll just throw it on social media, like, hey, who's going to be out there? And I'll get a couple people. And I'm like, oh, that makes it even better, There's other people willing to go out there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about running to develop yourself more. Sweet. Let's talk about the 3 traits that you brought up to the table. And what's great is that we've already covered a couple of them. But for those listening, you brought up share your wins and struggles. Strong leaders make time for the details, know the basics, and then transparency. So if you want to hit on those, I think those would be some great ones to jump into now because those ones are phenomenal.
Sharing wins and struggles. You got to share both sides of the process. Like, and again, Instagram is a place for that. You see like a lot of wins, like, oh, I accomplished this, and that's phenomenal. Like I love like their encouragement, but I think we have to be realistic when we show this type of process. Like you got to show the process where like you're waking up at 3 a.m, like grinding out, trying to, build a good base to what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Or like, even like for leadership, like what are you doing to like enhance your leadership or, be a little bit more flexible as a leader? Like for myself, it's like books. Like, of course I have a way where I know it's effective, but it's not the only way. So like getting different perspectives from other established leaders and, trying different things every day or like little by little, it's very important. And then you gotta tell your leaders, like, hey, I haven't always been successful. I failed at this and this and this, but I was able to, mitigate that or repeating that mistake by taking this approach. So I think that you have to be very transparent with your wins and your losses. A strong leader makes time for the details and knows the basics. Details are important. Like, little story, I joined the organization where doing the standard is crazy. Like they're like, oh, you submitted your troops to task for the month. Oh my God, nobody does that. And like for me, that's like a basic thing to do. I would hope you would know where the soldiers are at. You know what I'm saying? So you it's like being a leader like that, knowing the details and try to establish or reestablish a standard that's like non-existent. It's very important because accountability. I'm huge on accountability for myself, for my soldiers. Like I'm huge on it. So like with my leaders, I'm like be punctual, or communicate. If you're gonna be late, why? You know what I'm saying? And then I can communicate it up to others, which hold me accountable. But it's like you have to get that in practice, and it comes from the details, and then know the basics. It's just knowing the basics of a leader. Like it's not like putting on stripes and just going crazy. It's not that. I try to express the importance of being a leader. Got a couple soldiers going to the promotion board next month, and I pull them in every day. At the end of the day, like I ask you why are you doing this? And then they'll do like the generic, I want to instill change. I'm like, but why? Why do you want to instill change? Like, how do you find that effective? You got to ask those questions beyond just the initial answer. And then incorporate, like, you got to know the basics of the leader, like counseling, developing. It's like, again, you got to understand, like, once you pin, or actually right now, that as you transition, again, it's not about you. It's being less about you and more about them. So what do you know about them? So that's a big thing. Just knowing the basis of a leader and why you want to be that leader. And then absolute transparency. With myself, I share everything. Like, cause like you never know what's gonna happen. Like, cause as right now in my position, like I don't have a captain counterpart. So I'm like, I'm just NCO running a whole platoon without a counterpart on staff, which is very demanding because you're like, the staff side, the officer side, and the NCO side kind of different. Me in charge of operations, they're in charge of like information flow and accountability of the platoon. So doing both, of course, takes more time away. So that means I have to change my approach to my leaders. Like, hey, now I have to hold you a little bit more accountable, give you a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? So this is happening. This is happening. And I'll ask them like, hey, like, what does that trigger for you? You know, just to kind of test them. What does that trigger for you that when you hear we have support a table 5 gunnery rotation? What's that mean for you? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, hey, every detail I get, I pass it down to my squad leaders, my team leaders. And because to bring them in, like, you are a part of this. It's not just receive orders and to do it. Okay, what is your role? Now, like, the soldiers, like, immediately under you, like, what's the trigger for them? You know what I'm saying? So bringing them in and sharing that importance of information, I think, is definitely vital as a leader.
Yeah, I'll touch on each 3 too. I am now a big fan of sharing my struggles. You know, early in my career, I did not. You know, I just didn't. You know, and that was just the perspective of leaders. I'll say like the early 2000s and before, right? As far as like showing only what you were good at, and that's what everybody should emulate. And then social media came on board, and then I think it got blown out of proportion with everybody sharing their wins, and then there was like this false like check of just sharing the good old side, you know. And honestly, it always ties back to first form for some reason, but they are very good on sharing their struggles, being open as a nutrition person and all that, and because they talk about weight loss journeys, so they want you to share what you struggled with. And so I took that on my leadership as well. Like, how do I motivate airmen to not just look at me for my transformation in fitness and as my rank, but, you know, like, what else have I done? And so I was like, I can just share what I messed up on, because I've messed up a lot. I share it, man. I share my struggles in college when I got a DUI. I share my struggles with failing to attack PO, you know, like this recent airman NCO thing that blew up, you know, like that was a struggle I had to go through, and all these little things where some airmen, like airmen coming to the military now, when they see an officer, that's sort of what they see as wins, you know, so that they want to know something else. And so I usually challenge a lot of my younger officers, when you're going to become a young flight commander or get to know young airmen, share your struggles.
Yeah.
Because your airmen will open up more to you with that than sharing, oh, I graduated in this class, or here's my job, or, you know, what you're good at. They want to know what you're struggling with, because it just connects. It just builds that relationship a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love about social media. It allows us to get humbled and share our struggles, which is hard. And sometimes it's hard because those outside of us, when they see it, they may think it's weird, you know, that I share my struggles or that we're doing this, but it's usually not for those people. It's for the people that do care and that are seeing the journey and that want to get up there. So,
agreed.
And then, basics and details. I've told so many airmen, you can get ahead so much in your job just by being good at the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's crazy to see in the Air Force and probably in some other branches, the standard is, I want to say, so low that if you did the basics, you'd be ahead.
Yeah. It's the same.
So I'll tell them, like, to show up to work on time or early. Like, that'll get you ahead. Submit your stuff on time. That'll get you ahead. You know, like, do that stuff and you'll move ahead. So that's like one of my easiest leadership traits I'll tell people is just get good at the basics, man. Like, and that can be just the way you dress, the way you appear, and you'll move ahead. You know, then you can start working on other things that are a little more challenging.
Yeah, agreed.
Transparency, it sort of goes along the lines of the struggles. I didn't really see it have a huge impact. When I say huge impact, like, mean a lot to me. When I started having my direct supervisor as my commander. So on the officer side, when I was a flight commander and an ADO that I am now, my direct supervisor was my commander, my squadron. So lieutenant colonel usually, and they're really busy. And I wasn't used to, like, telling them sort of what I'm doing or what I'm doing outside of work so that they could tell other people. I didn't know that that's how the chain worked. You know, usually when they're asking me for something, it's because somebody was asking them and they needed like a short turn. So then I was like, how do I get ahead of this? And then I think I just read about like transparency, you know, like they need to know everything you're doing, why you're doing it, when you're doing it. So if somebody asks them, like, what's Stanier doing today? They can be like, oh, he's got this, he's this. And so now I'm really transparent, you know, like my new leadership I work with, when I told them I run a podcast, I was nervous, but I had to be transparent because it's a passion of mine. So I was like, hey, sir, I do a podcast. Like, I don't know if you know that. Sometimes I'll schedule it during work if I have time, like during my lunchtime, or on a day I'll leave at like 2, do a podcast, depending on the time, the people I'm with. And I'll put it on the schedule. But if it's there and flying or something takes priority, I'll do that. It's just there. And he was like, cool. No, that's fine. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I thought they'd be like, no, don't do it. But
Yeah.
it's because I'm transparent, like,
No.
and so it gets that weight off your chest when you're transparent. It allows them to build a relationship with you if they don't have one. Because some commanders aren't going to know the questions to get to know you because they're real busy. So I see transparency more going up too.
Yeah.
It's definitely beneficial going down, but it's hard to say it down because there's a lot more people usually below us. So it's hard to tell everybody that you're transparent. So I'll tell a lot of younger people, be transparent with your supervisor. Be transparent with those above you so they know, like if they're trying to put you up for an award or looking for PCSs or other opportunities, they know who to pick based off of you expressing your goals.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing to, which is it's like a forbidden shadow in the military, right? You never tell people your career because if it's something they don't want you to do, you're not going to do it. So in the flying community, it's like, I'm trying to think how it is. It's like perceived wrong. Like in the flying community, if you tell somebody you don't want to fly and you want to do other jobs, you're an outcast.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, oh, you don't want to do this, or why not? You don't want to go to weapons school. And so it's like a hidden code. You don't tell everybody what you want to do, but you still try to do it, so it doesn't help. And so early on in my career, when I was transparent about it, it closed some doors, which I was upset about, but it opened other doors to where I sort of got back to that journey later on down the road. And that's why I tell people it's hard sometimes to be transparent with your career if it's not the path the military wants you to go down.
Yeah.
We all know every job has a specific path they want you to go down. Go to this, do this rank. You should be here as an instructor, or this to become a colonel or a commander. But if you tell them you don't want to do that and you want to go these other ways, eventually you'll get to that end goal. It's just taking a couple steps. You'll become a better person still overall.
Yeah. No.
So that's why I tie that transparency. And it's helped me feel more comfortable. Sometimes when I'm trying to do new things, like take on endurance challenges or train more or do other things, I just tell my boss, I'm like, hey, sir, I got a 100-mile bike ride coming up a couple months, or maybe a couple days where my lunch break is maybe 2 hours. But don't worry, I'm not like watching Netflix. I'm probably just on my bike sweating my butt off.
Yeah.
And I'll be back to work, Sometimes you just tell them that stuff. And what's the worst they can say is like, no, man, I need you to work. Cool. I'll do it another time.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I like about being transparent is if your commander has his opinion and just says no, like that's fine. Like, you don't have to get upset about it if they say no. It's they usually understand a bigger picture that they're saying no for a reason.
Yeah.
And so that has also allowed me to be more open as well. Pretty sure a lot of people are always upset when like their supervisors tell them no, they can't do that because of this, and they're like, oh well, why not? But usually those supervisors know there's a reason why.
Yeah.
They know there's another opportunity down the road that's going to have that same option, and the same airman can do it. But usually at the time, those supervisor leaders can't explain it all right then and there because they're real busy.
Yeah.
So they're going to be like, no, go do this. And you should be like, yes, sir, got it.
Yeah.
I'll come back later. But yeah.
No, I definitely appreciate you sharing that. That's a good perspective. Like, again, transparency goes up. And that's definitely something I try to do, which, I want to be a little bit more consistent. It's like, not having time, but you can always make the time. Like, and I'm a person, I like to say I'm everywhere because I'm literally everywhere. I'm like on foot. Once I park for the day, I probably don't move my car. I'm like walking around on 4 Cavazos, just trying to do everything. But when I am transparent, it is very effective. And then it builds those professional relationships, like, molds of professional relationships that, need to be strong, definitely in the position I'm in. So no, I definitely agree with you. Transparency going up is just as important as transparency going down. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Were there any other leadership traits you had on my list before we jump into a book?
Yeah. Well, I can touch on all of them, honestly. But yeah, this leadership as a whole, it's a journey. It's a journey of growth. You know what I'm saying? So it's some areas like you're not going to be good at, but I like to identify areas where like I'm not good at. Again, like I said before, I just want to be better. That's always the overall goal, to be the best leader I can be, and give my best output. You know what I'm saying? And then receive input. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I can talk about any point of view from leadership ever, but yeah, I think the ones we provide are definitely the strongest ones for sure.
Yeah, and what I love about leadership is it's never ending, and there's not like a top cap, right? Like,
yeah,
that's what I try to tell a lot of people is you should always have your core leadership traits. Like for me, like right now is my 4 leadership philosophy. It helps me ground myself there, but I'm still learning leadership traits. And I tell a lot of people leadership isn't new.
Yeah.
Everything is either bought, stolen, or recreated. Like my leadership traits are not new.
Yeah.
Andy Frisella uses them all the time. I just apply them to my life, and I really like them.
Yeah.
And so that's how I try to break down leadership to people who are nervous about becoming a leader or trying to develop their skills. Is one, you need to try a lot of them to see which one fits, which is hard because you're going to fail, you're going to struggle in some of them, and then leadership is always changing. I've had plenty of conversations with people on my podcast where leadership is person to person.
Yeah.
Like if Johnny doesn't like to be direct in his feedback, I need to know that leadership trait. If Susan likes me to like sort of not be direct and like the nice sandwich approach to feedback, then that's what I got to do.
Yeah.
If Timmy is wants to do this, that's what makes leadership fun.
Yeah.
That's why I love the relationship side of it, because you can't adapt your leadership unless you don't know the person.
Yeah.
And it's just cool to think about that. Like you're never the best leader. You're never going to have it all, but you can always get better.
Yeah, agreed. And just to close with that one, like something I do tell my soldiers, like leadership is not about status or title. It's about responsibility. You know what I'm saying? If you seeking admiration over like empowerment, you're doing it wrong. You're approaching it wrong, and you need to go back to the drawing board. So even though like leadership again is like a thing that everybody knows, you need to know more. It's always more to learn about leadership, and just don't take like the surface of it and try to apply it. Like really understand why you want to be incorporated into leadership. So, yeah.
And for most people, they are already leaders.
Yes.
Like I think a lot of younger people in the military are waiting for someone to tell them like you're a leader.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, I can lead. Like, no, you can lead after AIT or basic from day one. And just like we talked about, it could be basic. Just showing up on time, you're a leader. Getting an excellent on your PT test, you're a leader. Learning a new language, you're a leader because you're trying something new. And so sometimes that's all they need to hear is like, hey, do you want to be a leader? Usually, and sometimes they just need to be told they can lead. You've probably seen it a lot too. Hey, knuckleheads, relax. Or it's just like, hey, just go out and I bless you to be a leader. And they're like, okay, cool. And then they're going to start leading. You're like, where were you before?
They needed you.
Yeah.
You say it.
But what book do you have for everybody out there as we get ready to close it out?
I would say the most important book for me for the past couple of years, which I read over and over again, is The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. Mastering self-sabotage or self-mastery over self-sabotage. So identifying what makes you great and uncovering the unawareness of what's stopping you. It's a phenomenal book. Everybody I come in contact with, it starts with you. If you can master yourself, you can build the momentum to master everything applying to yourself and empower others to do the same. So yeah, The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest.
Nice. So I just added it. The book I'm reading right now, again, is The Coaching Habit. Oh, you son of a gun. I knew you were going to do that. You are so lucky, dog. Get it. Oh, man. It's Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. I love it because now that I'm reading it again, it talks about these 7 primary questions to ask as a leader. And so, obviously, conversation is huge as leadership, right? Like, let them talk. Let them get what they got to say out. And so I'm reading it again, and I'm like, oh, man, this is good. Because it's by the premise that everybody's a coach, right? We're all coaches. How do I be an effective coach and use the tools of asking questions to be a good coach? So it breaks it down pretty simple, and I'm pretty excited to read it again. And then I'll drop it in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
So with that being said, man, do you have any last final shots?
No, I definitely appreciate you inviting me on. I've been eager about this when you reached out to me. I was like, man, I get to really pick your mind. I do got 2 questions for you though.
Oh, go. Let's do it.
Cool. So first question, how do you ensure effective leadership at your level?
At my level?
Your level.
Effective leadership. I think effective leadership to me at my level would be knowing that those below me they understand the why, which we talked about, because for them to execute and get the mission done, they have to know the why. So my role right now as a leader is to take the commander's intent, funnel it down to my flights, and make sure they are providing me the data to give to my commander. So how do I know I'm being an effective leader there? If they're coming up to me with data without me asking, right? So they know why. And I can take it and give it to the commander before he is asking me, hey, what is going on here? What is going on there? That's been hard for me because I'm still trying to fly. I'm learning the shops I'm managing. I don't know what they do. And so I don't know the job. And so it's been a struggle for me to be like, hey, sir. So I always use this excuse of like, I just don't know what they do. So I'm learning. But so I got some good feedback from him on like, hey, I was going to bring it up. The leadership trait he taught me was sometimes you have to be in the chili until you know how the chili is cooked. And I was like, oh my God. So I told my flight sat, I was like, hey guys, I'm going to be in your chili asking you what you're doing daily, what you're doing on this task, who's doing it, when is it due, so that I know when how you make your chili, I'll step out of it. And so it's a good way for new leaders to be in a leadership role right away. And so you said, because you have to be transparent, right? With those people below you, like, hey, I don't know what you do. So for me to know it, I'm going to ask you every day, probably in an email, what do you got on your schedule today? What's coming up that the boss needs to know of that I can tell him beforehand? And as I build that rhythm monthly, I won't have to ask it all the time because I'll be able to see it in your schedule. I'll be able to check it, and then I can feed the boss.
Yeah.
And so that is how I know at my level I'm an effective leader. The bottom's coming up to me with data. I call it feed the bear is a good expression. They're feeding the bear. But then I can also feed the bear above me before he gets hungry and comes asking me for questions.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good 3-minute spiel there.
So I appreciate that. And then my last question, can you provide an example of a difficult decision you had to make in your process you did to arrive to?
I think a difficult situation that I talk about a lot is getting out of the flying community and trying to cross-train to another job as an officer.
Yeah.
That was pretty difficult to attempt because, like I said, in the flying community, usually you don't try to leave. And so when I expressed to my leadership I wanted to try a new job as an officer, there was a lot of hesitancy on their end because they don't want to lose a body. They thought I didn't want to fly and be a flyer, but I just wanted to try and push myself a little bit further.
Yeah.
And so what helped was being transparent with my leadership on why I wanted to do it. And I told them, I was like, I want to, being a prior SEER instructor in the Air Force, as an enlisted guy, I was very tactical and out in the woods, and I had to find another itch for that. And so when this opportunity came to cross-train attack P officer, I was like, man, this is going to help fulfill that, status quo of me pushing my body to past my limits and doing that. So it was difficult to ask, but I had to be transparent with my leadership. My commander was really open with me on the feedback, and he allowed me the opportunity. The hardest thing in that is when I failed, when I didn't get selected for TAC PO last March. And so March is always going to be a bitter time for me every year now because that's when I went through that week of hell for that selection phase and I didn't get selected, and I cried my eyes out for 3 days straight because I put a full year into that training. And it wasn't even a year I put into it. It was the past 3 because I was only able to attempt it because I changed my leadership 3 years ago. I started doing all this stuff. So that was a tough decision, but it, for every door that closes, more open. And so when that didn't happen, a lot more doors open. I came back in the flying community with open arms from my current leadership that were excited for me to come back. We had a baby, we got a new house, all this stuff started lining up. And so all this stuff came into line. And so overall, just doing difficult things, even if you fail, they're still going to have great endings.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, sir. Yeah. Heck yeah.
Cool. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up here. We'll hang out after for download. I'll get your info. We'll put it in the show notes. For those listening, thank you. As always, save, share, like, love, do what you got to do. And then until next time, man, I look forward to getting a run-in with you now too, since we're on that journey. So.
Yes, sir.